Mr. Pane, thank you very much for being with us on a Blue Magic 7cent.com podcast. I'm looking very, very much to this conversation. And first, I will do a little introduction of you. You are an author of many books: The Awakening, Life Force, The Awakening, Key to Extraterrestrial Messages, The Quickest Way to Develop Extrasensory Perception, to mention some. You have been training for more than 35 years and in 20 disciplines. And your experience and knowledge are powerful tool for anyone who is a true seeker, and knowledge are powerful tool for anyone who is ready to complete inner awakening. Your life goal is to help in the process of truly awakening humanity through a deep understanding of who we are, where we come from, what we are doing here, and where we're going. Your Balkan tour this year is third and final seminar dealing with awakening and cultivating inner strength. These seminars are in Belgrade on 29th of June, in Ljubljana on 6th of July, Zagreb on 7th of July, and Skopje on 14th of July. What will people get there? Here are some topics: a large display of the multiverse and its planes and dimensions, alignment with your higher purpose and place in divine cosmic plan. Exercise a deep and progressive meditative state that will allow you to move between levels. More understanding of your dreams and how they come about. Use your chi energy power. Learn to look at the distance, seeing from a distance through time and space, and some more others. So today, first of all, actually, I would like you to maybe mention how your path or what you're doing for so long, basically awakening people and showing them the real reality. Maybe in a short couple sentences or couple minutes to tell us your very unique situation that occurred when you were a young boy. So thank you again, please.
Sure. It is a real pleasure, Mr. Matters. And thank you so much for inviting me and for this wonderful opportunity to share my experience and my multiverse that we are all part of. So it is true, I've been on this road for a very, very long time. Excuse me. It's been over 35 years, and my path actually started when I was only 7 years old. At the time, I was living in Skopje in Macedonia, and together with my brother, we used to just walk nearby home, very close to the Vardar River. And he was doing martial arts, and one evening, as we were literally walking close to the river, next to the full moon, there was another literally object that was extremely shiny, and I asked my older brother, who he's no longer with us anymore, unfortunately, but at the time, you know, he was a lot older, 14 years older than me, and I asked him, you know, how can there be two moons? And well, I didn't get any response from him. I turned my head towards him, and he was literally staring into this light that started literally accelerating rapidly towards us. So when it reached about 50 meters away from us, the entire environment, if you will, started literally producing very strong pulses of yellow, orange, and red light. And I was able to see that this kind of like a sphere shape of object that was surrounded by some kind of like a burning plasma. And we were literally experiencing some form of smell and some kind of like a static sound, if you will. Very shortly after that, there was a huge white flash that appeared, and the moment that actually occurred, I literally felt weightless. And the first thing that I noticed was that I'm having difficulty to breathe. I couldn't get a breath, so to speak. And that lasted for a couple of seconds. And in one area of the whiteness, literally the view started clearing up, and I was noticing that as it cleared up more and more, there are some kind of like a silhouettes that are standing, you know, from above and looking at us. As it cleared even more, I noticed that those silhouettes are not human. And that's where the first contact appeared, and I started to hear thoughts in my head on a Macedonian language, and the content was that we shouldn't be afraid because they are not here to harm us. As the force literally lifted us into their ship, I noticed that everything inside, first of all, there was like a huge hole. Everything was literally high tech, but in a sense like we have never seen. Everything was alive, like a form of nanotechnology, which they were using to produce virtual holograms, and on their symbols and languages, doing certain algorithms. That's where I split it with my brother, and they took me into a different passage, which it led to a different room where they mentioned to me that they need to run some tests to be sure. I didn't know what to make of it at the time, but one of those creatures literally looked up into the ceiling, and there was a light source that appeared, and in the same time I noticed that they created literally out of nothing, like it just appeared, you know, like a line platform, which I actually lied upon as they were suggesting, and they said that it will not hurt at all, they just need to relax. And as soon as I literally light on the platform, I was looking at the light, and from the light source, I started to notice there are like a beams of light that started literally shining on my body. You know, I didn't feel any pain whatsoever, but I felt like colder and warmer sensations. And at that point, I felt I need to close my eyes. And the moment I closed my eyes, I literally felt that my clothing is gone. You know, I was just literally naked. And as the laser beams, if you will, were moving through my body, they were literally scanning my past. At the time, I didn't know what actually they were doing, but in the later context, I actually discovered that they have the technology to read the DNA base, you know, the storage that we actually keep from incarnation to incarnation for the last 30, 40, 50, 60,000 years, even prior, which means they were looking for special qualities, if you will, special experiences and motivation in existence, if you will, to help others so they can do the change. And as the beams of light progressed further, they literally stopped on the body and they concentrated on the right side of my brain. And that's where I started feeling some kind of like a tickling, you know. And I noticed that they were literally rewriting that part of the brain, putting some kind of like a synthetic device, you know, that was literally hooking to my brain functionality, if you will. In other words, the moment they were done, I was able to hear their thoughts a lot more louder and a lot more clearer than before. And they mentioned on a Macedonian language, that were all transmitted telepathically, of course, that they have done certain things to me that will produce or will result with me experiencing certain things. And in time, the experience of those certain things will lead to the point that I will understand most of them, how they work, and I will be able to pass this knowledge to humanity. And they also mentioned that they are very glad that they have found me before the others did. At the time, I was really not aware who are those others that they are referring, but now I have a crystal clear, perception and experience for who they were referring to. But the thing is, they were saying that humanity has a chance for evolution. And that if we literally do the steps, if you will, properly, we can break free from the bondage that we are in for the last 4,000 years plus. And that's where the experience ended, and they literally made the floor like a half transparent, and I was able to see the Vodno mountain in Skopje as we were literally flying towards the city. And as they reached the Karpush 4 settlement where I was living with my mother and brother at the time, I literally, as soon as I noticed that the neighborhood, there was another white flash. So the same experience followed, a huge whiteness, literally weightlessness, and difficulty of breathing. And after a couple of seconds, I literally appeared in my bedroom. So the first thing that occurred to me, what happened to my brother, and I jumped out of the bed and I went straight into his room. When I went inside, I was a bit shocked because actually I was literally surprised. He was literally sitting on his bed, staring at the ceiling, and there was a blood coming from his right nostril opening. And my mother, she woke up, and when she saw my brother, she started screaming, what's happening, what's happening? And after a couple of minutes or so, my brother stabilized, he normalized, and she was asking him, what happened. And first of all, she was asking, how did we go back home? Because the main entrance door, she locked it from the inside. There was no access, from outside. And she was aware that we went for a walk.
Mm-hmm.
And my brother told her that the last thing that he remembered is that we were walking next to the river and the object appeared and there was a white flash, and that was the last thing that he remembered. But on the other hand, I was literally aware of every second of the experience. And I started talking with my mother, explaining, about the creatures, how they looked like, what they wanted, and whatever. And she freaked out. She said that she will be calling the police or eventually the family members. But we're talking about 1980. In those days, if you remember the ex-Yugoslavia region, to speak that you have encountered extraterrestrial beings, it will not end well, of course, right? So luckily, my brother took her out of it, and she literally cooled down. But that's where the paranormal phenomena started for me. Immediately, literally the same night, I started to feel strange. There was a buzzing sound in my ears, and as soon as I literally passed very close, like a sharp edge, for example, from the dining table, I was feeling that something is literally stabbing me or it's cutting me. And while I was like a meter away from the table, I was able to sense that corner, because the sensitivity of my auric field, if you will, was increased to such a high degree. And the voices started in a day or two, literally as they were thinking about the regular stuff, my mother making lunch or whatever, just like tuning, into the radio station, into the right frequency without any concentration or desire. It was just switching on. I was able to hear everything that she was thinking about.
Wow.
And but the most incredible thing was that during the night, eventually I woke up, but I woke up in a very strange state. It was a state where I was not able to physically move. It was like a vibrational state that produced a very strong zooming sound, like a buzzing sound in my ears. And then I felt weightless. And as I felt weightless, I felt that somehow I'm like losing gravity, and I was lifted up. As soon as I lifted up like a meter or two, I turned around and I saw my little body lying on the bed. And that's where I freaked out. I thought that I'm dying. But in the later years, I discovered that people call that exteriorization of the consciousness, so where the consciousness separates from the physical body and projects on the astral plane, if you will. And after a couple of attempts, I managed to pass through the ceiling, and I managed to be around or above the roof at the time, but I was not aware that I can fly. So I literally was doing a very long 15, 20 meters, jumps from one roof to another. But the interesting part was that always there was like an orb of light which was following me about 50 meters away from me, like it's literally babysitting me what I'm going to do next, if you will. Anyway, long story short, it ended with the incident. One evening, my mother, she was supposed to put me to bed, if you will, and she had those like electrical blankets that she bought from Germany. She put it on, and in the meantime, her neighbor, Trianka, she rang her and she said, if she wants to come for a coffee and to bring me also along, which she agreed, but she forgot to unplug the electrical, blanket. So we went into the neighbor's house, and I started playing with her children. They had a coffee, but in the meantime, as I was playing, I started to feel unpleasant sensation that something is wrong, like a pulses from inside. And as the minutes were passing by, I started to see the room in fire. And I approached my mother. I said, "Look, Mom, I think that there is something wrong with the house. Something is not right. It feels like it's burning." And she started laughing, and she said, "Don't make up things, just go continue playing. You see, I'm having a coffee." And after 5-10 minutes, that intensified to such a degree that I was literally physically seeing the room in fire. So I approached her again, and I said, "Look, Mom, I'm positive that something is not right, and I think the house is on fire. Let's go and check it out." And she started to be more aggressive, but luckily the neighbor, Trianka, she literally said, "Pepice, just don't worry, it's just nearby. Let's go check it out, grab some fresh air anyway." So as we did, as soon as we get to the angle that our house was literally where we were renting at the time visible, there was a huge smoke coming out of it from the windows. My mother started screaming, and luckily the neighbors came, and with the buckets of water and whatever someone can grab, they put the fire down before it actually assimilated through the electrical installation and burned the house to the ground, so to speak, to ashes. As soon as all the people were gone, police came. They actually do report and everything else. Then the police left also. She started screaming, "What the heck is going on with you? How are you able to do all this stuff?" And she said that she will be taking me to a surgery tomorrow morning, just to see what the heck is wrong with me. And you can imagine a 7-year-old boy, when it actually is hit with such aggression, And it was a serious situation because, as mentioned, everything was black, that the walls were black, from the fire. And I literally switched off the force. So for the next 7 years plus, nothing paranormal literally occurred at all. I just had a beautiful childhood, like everyone else. but it wasn't meant to be. When I was about 14 years of age, a bit more, my mother took me to Lepoglava, which is a place very close to Varaždin, about 200 kilometers away from Zagreb, where my uncle was living at the time, and he was very, how should I put it, educated into the Tibetan meditation, into yoga, into Tai Chi, you know, and all that kind of stuff. And he was talking about yogis that were able to physically levitate, moving objects, doing, you know, out of body experiences. And the moment he actually talked about out of body experience, it just rang a bell for all those experiences that took place when I was a little kid. And at the time, I don't know if you remember or not, but that magazine Arca was actually coming out everywhere in the Balkans. It was just before the Third Eye magazine, because I also was chief editor of, you know, the Sixth Sense magazine that was actually coming out in the entire Macedonian region at the time. You know, about 2009, you know, that time frame. But nevertheless, this magazine that he gave me was talking about astral projection, and there was a technique that actually consisted out of 7 segments that you need to visualize, you know, once when you enter a very deep state of relaxation. And when I literally noticed what was actually described there, I knew that there is no more stopping for me now. So I started progressively training, and it took me about 12 months of training to induce my first self-induced out-of-body experience. It wasn't anything special. It was probably around, I don't know, 20, 30 seconds, you know, more or less, you know, experience. But as time progressed more and more, I started literally training with ESP cards, which are the Zener cards. They consist of 5 symbols, you know, plus, wave, star, square, and circle, which are used for testing of the extrasensory perception for little kids or adults, you know, depending of if they are literally more in tune with the sense, or they are more visual, kind of like a you know, people that can literally psychically, you know, read the target. And as this progressed more and more, my astral projections literally extended, you know, to 5-10 minutes, and then 20 minutes, and I was again keep on training, and then eventually I wanted to reach space. But every time when I departed the physical body, because most of the time I was using the sleep paralysis, I was entering a vibrational state where I was not able to move during the nighttime. And as soon as the vibrational state was on, there was a high buzzing sound, you know, with a high pitch, you know, sound in my ears. And literally, as the energy came to my head, I was just pushing myself out of the body. And as soon as the head of my astral body went out, the buzzing sound stopped. I was able to see my physical body. I was able to see my bedroom, you know, and everything else. But as soon as I passed the walls, you know, did some flying and whatever, as soon as I was directing myself straight up, always around 35, 40 something kilometers roughly, I was hitting an invisible barrier, literally like a ceiling, bang. And that's where my astral excursion, you know, my astral travel cut off. And I was either literally pushed back to my physical body, or I was pulled back, and about like a meter or two, seeing my physical body, and just gently, slowly, I was literally pulled down, and I wake up physically. And I tried that so many times, and it didn't work. And then eventually, the contacts with the extraterrestrials, how should I put it, intensified again. You know, it started happening from the same beginning, because they were monitoring me all the way, so to speak. But when I got in contact with the positive ones, I asked them, you know, how come I cannot leave the planet and reach the space? And they explained to me that planet Earth is unfortunately in a kind of like a quarantine, if you will, which the human souls cannot depart the planet with a vehicle which is not good enough or compatible. And I asked them, what do you mean? And they said the vehicle that you're actually using now, it's not sufficient to pass the barrier. And I said, okay, so what do you mean? How can I overpass that? How can I overcome that? And they said there is a way to change the vibration, to change the frequency of the consciousness. And they said the next time when you actually enter a vibrational state, which we call sleeping paralysis, they said as soon as the energy that we call kundalini, if you will, rise up and reaches the head, don't depart the physical body yet. Just wait and concentrate for something which is most divine in yourself. So everyone resonates with something. For some people, it's God. For other people, it's cosmic love, brotherhood, whatever.
Yeah.
And I open up as they suggested, and literally focused on cosmic love and into morality and peace for all the creatures in the universe. But it was honest. Believe it or not, mothers, it was just exploding energy. Previously, when I was entering the sleep paralysis episodes, there was like always like a darkish bluish light that was occurring. But this time there was like a rainbow light that was literally shining everywhere. And it didn't need to reach the head. I was just feeling as it's the energy and the intensity is building up. I felt that it's good enough. And that's where I departed the physical body. The moment I departed the physical body, I noticed that despite the fact that it's about 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, and in the room should be pitch black, my auric field was literally producing photons, producing light, and it was illuminating the room. And I called this body self-luminescent body. And this self-luminescent body was so much more powerful, I wanted to move out of the apartment. I was living on the 4th floor in Skopje, and no, it's just a suburb at the time. As soon as I literally focused on that, in a split of a second, I was out of the balcony. So I went down straight towards the parking, and the grass in front of the building. I literally, as I was standing up, completely illuminated with light, I just put my, half transparent hands in fist, and I took off straight ahead. And as I took off straight ahead, I passed the barrier and I moved straight up, and I noticed the curvature of the planet Earth. And as soon as I was able to observe, the Italy, ex-Yugoslavia region, the European region, I noticed that certain balls of light started manifesting from my right side. They were very happy with the progress that was made, but in the same time, from my left side, there was a group of vehicles that appeared out of the blue also, that were not like a disc shape or cigar shape, but they were more like, this kind of like a irregular shape.
Yeah.
And I noticed that there is like a telepathic communication between them, that supposedly the balls of light have violated a treaty, if you will. And in order to protect me, the balls of light cut off the experience, and they returned me to my physical body with a shock. Literally my body, physical body jumped, if you will.
Yeah.
But I wasn't disappointed. I'm disappointed. I was literally jumping from joy. That was one of the kind experience, if you will.
I would like you just to stop you a little bit here. So basically, from all of you saying, right? So we have positive aliens and negative or extraterrestrials, whatever you want to call them here. Some of them are here to help us, some of them are not, right? Why I'm asking this, because my personal experience that I went through hypnosis called QHHT, and it showed me one of past life, parallel lives, whatever we want to call that, right? Is that I was fighting for in a space for the good ones, to balance the for the balance in the universe. And when I was in that state, even now that I'm talking to you, I can see the shapes that, I mean, they're the shapes that I can't describe now. Unfortunately, I can't draw, so I would draw properly this. But I saw you literally bases and, you know, communities. And in one of your interviews that I watched, you mentioned ships, 10,000, 20,000 kilo, even more bigger. I mean, I saw not that big ones, but I saw literally a ship where had thousands and thousands and windows. Like I literally had to move back to see it. And it showed me in the way that my mind could perceive, because while I was under hypnosis, it changed the shape while I was doing it, right? So it showed me that I could understand. And so in this, with this question, I would like to ask you about the consciousness. In once you said that our consciousness is here, is captured, or they trying to capture all of us. And maybe it's three-part question, because it's a lot of, I have a lot of questions. But what is consciousness? Where our consciousness as a global now, from your point of view, where is at? And maybe later we can talk about the solutions. But maybe if you can start somewhere, wherever you feel like it. So
Sure. Look, in order to understand the presence in the solar system, one thing is crystal clear, is that we are not alone. We have never been alone. And there are intelligence out there that is literally monitoring our, how should I put it, existence, and they have interaction in a positive and a negative way. But before we can even understand about the consciousness and what's going on, we have to go back in time.
please.
So if we go back in time, and we can see that we are not the first advanced civilization on planet Earth. We can obviously see that in the ancient times, there were cultures that had flying technology, nanotechnology. They had extreme knowledge of consciousness, as you mentioned, you know, and the powers that are connected, or what the consciousness can utilize. In a sense, as far as I was informed, it contradicts the entire, you know, publicly accepted history that is pushed by the Smithsonian Institute, which is owned by the Freemasons, if you will, and the secret societies, which is pushing an agenda that the dinosaurs have literally disappeared millions of years ago and all that kind of stuff. They have all the answers for millions of years ago, but when you ask them about 3,000-4,000 years ago, all of a sudden everything becomes bloody, if you will. Nevertheless, I can only share my experience.
Mr. Pane, I apologize to interrupt you. I just would like you to know that you know, you talk as you want, but for me, what you're talking about is not something new. So so please, the way you want to present it, the way, or do you want to show the information for people that are just at the start of this path, or you want to go directly into more deeply? It's up to you. But
sure.
For me, this is very well known, everything. So you please.
Yes, that's good. So what I'm trying to say is that from what they have shared with me is that this solar system was populated a lot, you know, closer to our time than what we are led to believe. They mentioned that the first colonists actually arrived about 70,000 years ago into the solar system, terraforming the Earth, terraforming the Mars and the planet that was once orbiting between Mars and Jupiter. So they have literally created the oxygen, the hydrogen, and all the other necessary elements for biological existence. The main base was on the planet that was once orbiting between between Mars and Jupiter, but planet Earth was also heavily populated, and those are the ones that we refer to as ancient Lemurians. They built cities on the ground, but they also created a lot of underground networks. And the main center was an island in the Gobi Desert, which is today Mongolia, which was referred as a White Island or the city of Shambhala. So this city practically was the capital of all the civilization, and the civilization actually arrived in the solar system with only one intention: to make environment compatible for evolution. So by evolution, they refer that the main experiences that we are also having, they're only part of the catalyst process, which means you experience good experiences, bad experiences, or what we refer to as good as bad. But nevertheless, whatever experience, our pure essence, if you will, the soul essence, if you will, experiences, it progresses on that path towards evolution as single or also as a part of the race. So in their stages of evolution, because as mentioned, they clearly stated that whatever we believe that the life appeared from amoeba, and then developed into high, more evolved, living forms is completely false. They mentioned that the entire life came fully established. So with the flying technology, with everything else. So the thing is, what they were trying to say is that at the beginning of the universe, there was a one super consciousness which literally created a pulse which spread it around the universe, and this pulse had a different density, and it created actually 7 densities, out of which these physical densities where we are existing at the moment as we speak. And they said that this super consciousness literally seeded the entire universe with different races. Some of those races were positively oriented and the other ones were negatively oriented. And they explained this as a form of like a catalyst, which means certain races, as soon as they reach a certain technological achievement or development, if you will, they were concentrating towards well-being of their own race and evolution and helping the others, while the other races were more abusive, more selfish, if you will, and they literally found ways just to exploit other species. And the way they have explained that the universe is structured is that if you observe what the space agencies have come up with the very high tech when they were literally scanning the Milky Way and the galaxies all around us, so to speak, they found that the universe is consisting of 3 densities, major densities, if you will. So that's the so-called normal matter, or this physical reality that we are part of, which means this planet, solar system, galaxy, other galaxies. Then you have clusters of galaxies, superclusters of galaxies, and then eventually something which is referred to as cosmic web. And then we have the so-called invisible matter. They refer it as a dark matter because it doesn't interact with the light in the same way that we can see how the visible light is interacting with that part of the electromagnetic spectrum, if you will. But the interesting part is when they scanned 50 galaxy clusters, they found that this invisible matter region or dark matter region actually is consisting from 5 different densities. While they applied the same thing towards the region which they call dark energy or invisible energy, they couldn't find any fluctuations in the density. They just found one huge layer of space, if you will, which is behind the driving force. So in other words, we are talking about yang and yin energy of the universe, and this applies for everything. So bottom line, what I'm trying to refer here is that we are part of the universe, which consists of 7 densities. So one is normal matter region that we call physical space or physical world, physical dimension, physical plane of existence, whatever. And then we have 5 densities into the invisible matter region, where we have the etheric world, astral world, and so on and so forth. And then we have one super level of existence, super plane of existence, which is the highest one, if you will. And they said that as there are pathways and structures in the brain, how the neurons literally go through all that mass, if you will, these neural pathways are visible also in space. So in one point I asked the extraterrestrials, why it's black outside, why when we, let's say, go out during the night, we see the night sky, we see the star, why it's black. And they said that this is not the case everywhere. They said this is only black only in the regions where it's further away from those huge, gigantic cosmic pathways. And I asked them, what do you mean? And they said that the most evolved species, if you will, are concentrated mostly into that region where those cosmic neural pathways, and that's where it's not black. It's very nice bluish or greenish environment. It's almost like never dark. But the more we come towards the regions between those neural pathways, we have regions of dark space, which are called great voids. So these great voids are practically the regions where the most of the catalyst is happening, which means there you have races that are more abusive towards others, exploit the others for the selfish, purposes and so on and so forth. And unfortunately, they said at the moment we are at the region which belongs to dark void. So just to finish the question that you asked me, the ancient Lemurians literally were tuning into meditative oneness, so they can become literally one consciousness, which means they had a technology that was able to connect them. And how it was done is that every time when a new biological body was born, before the Kundalini energy, or what we refer to as a Kundalini energy, literally was released, there was no spike at the top of the head. But as soon as the energy went through the etheric system and what we refer to as chakras or energetic centers and reached the head, it produced a very strong biochemical reaction and literally a mutation of the entire brain mass. So at this stage, we have just a genetic resemblance with the small babies that when they're born, there's like a fontanelle, like a soft space on the top of the head, which is nothing more than just a genetic, heritage from the old days. In the ancient days, when the Kundalini energy was fully active and operational, it produced changes in the genetics, and these changes literally occurred with the growing of the extra parts in that fontanelle region. So one will probably ask why that's the case. So that's the case because they were tuning into the so-called yin energy of the ground and the yang energy which actually exists into the environment. And through this spike that was growing on top of their head, they were able to connect with the pagodas, which were literally like a Tesla transformers, which were utilizing that like a prana that once existed on this planet, and they were able to connect telepathically and so on and so forth. Bottom line, the technology that they were utilizing, there was like devices that as soon as they were sitting in a meditative position, they were able to pick or push that spike directly into the device. And the moment they pushed the spike into the device, they were able to connect. So which means imagine thousands and thousands of Asian Lemurians that were able to share their thoughts, their feelings, their experiences, their intellect, their energy. And they were able to do marvelous things, from literally creating, new temples, telekinetically building, reshaping the matter, doing group astral travels, to other dimensions, different parts of the space, and so on and so forth. And they were just about to make the transition when the dark force, which also exists inside the universe, so as the cosmic superconsciousness that created this, created different polarities, of the species, it created like two forces. One force which actually fights towards evolution, and the other force actually is stopping the evolution. So the way it works is that one race evolves and develops enough, it reaches a point where it assimilates or transcends all the experiences that can be experienced in the physical reality, and it's time to move up on the scale of evolution, from the physical matter existence into the immaterial universe, which means all the consciousness of the individuals become one, if you will, through this meditative oneness process, and migrates out of the planet. But the question is where it migrates. It literally joins the new baby super consciousness, if you will, which by now could be a product, probably a result of over millions of other races that evolved a lot, sooner than we did, if you will. And the thing is, as the dark side noticed that this transition is very close, because the more races evolve and join this baby super consciousness, if you will, the more forces of light become stronger. And that's why it resists. So the thing is, what I'm trying to say is that when I ask what's the purpose of existence, what are we doing here, why there is life in the universe, they said that the super consciousness that created this universe literally created a womb for the new super consciousness can literally be born, developed, and evolve into another giant cosmic super consciousness. And by doing that, it can get free from the bondage of the matter and literally shape the entire energetic universe, or building parallel universes, if you will. And long story short, as soon as the ancient Lemurians were very close to that transition stage, if you will, the dark side of the force sent other emissaries, if you will, which also started colonizing the solar system. Those are the ones with elongated skulls, with high intellect, the ones that built the ancient pyramids in Egypt, the pre-Columbian culture and so on and so forth. And eventually they pushed towards the point that there was a global conflict. So about 12,000 years ago, or more accurately around 11,600 years ago, a major planetary conflict appeared where the Asian civilizations were literally downgraded significantly. If you will, the life survived, but most of the cities were destroyed. And this happened as a result that the planet that was orbiting between Mars and Jupiter was destroyed with one single extremely large and powerful laser beam that came from a vehicle that belongs to Type 3 civilization, if you will. It came to the Sun portal, and literally once when it was destroyed, the Sun lost its gravity for a short time interval. As soon as the gravitational grip was lost, the ocean, the water in the oceans on planet Earth, literally they stumbled, and that's what they're referring as a great flood, if you will. So if you're referring, let's say, if we compare what 40 meters tsunami can do, let's say in Fukushima in Japan in 2011 regarding to the damage, just try to visualize, let's say 10, 15, 20, 30 kilometers tsunamis, what kind of force they will actually having. But that was not just that. The problem is that as soon as the water overflowed, without control, it put the pressure on the tectonic plates. And now we see that in Atlantic Ocean, there is a great Atlantic ridge, and also in the Pacific Ocean, there is a great Pacific ridge, a huge cracks in the tectonics, which also shows that there was a huge amount of earthquake activity. And not just that, we have literally evidence of the entire regions that were burnt out. We are just seeing craters, but we are not seeing any evidence of asteroid or a meteor or whatever. So obviously we are seeing a very high advanced technology that was using those weapons, if you will, to demolish the Asian civilization. Anyway, since the planet exploded, a huge chunk of the planet literally hit the Mars, and that's the huge scar that we are seeing on the face of the Mars nowadays. But the main problem was that all that debris, all that stone, and asteroids that came out of that planet literally blocked the sunlight, which means the sun was not able to reach planet Earth as it used to be the case, and it produced a drop in the temperature and a mini ice age, if you will. So that's why we are literally seeing mammoths with still food in their mouth, if you will. So whatever happened, it happened instantly in a second, 2 or 3. They literally were frozen, all of a sudden. But this ice age, if you will, didn't last long because the extraterrestrials using their technology, they literally cleared up the debris as much as possible. And they created, again, a livable environment to some degree, but this time they were in charge.
Yeah. I have a question here. I think Dr. Carlson, he scientifically proved that there were like floods, or let's call it a reset of the world, where just a couple of people or minimum number of people stayed and started again at least 4 times or 7 times. I think Dr. Carlson and Hancock. By my information, that happened by my research 81 times, but I'm not sure about that yet. My questions now to you, if we come about this consciousness, right? Like let's go, maybe if we touch your seminars and why your exercises can do for people, and why are so important your exercise, or raising our vibration, raising our energy, chi, working with our energies, chakras, and learning all about that for this moment in time. So if we go to now, because so the way I see it, right, is like, I mean, we have level of vibration where we need to achieve to go to this awakening or raising of consciousness. So if you can touch that, because for me personally, what you're doing, like you have gongs and you have that, and I'm doing on a daily basis is called Falun Dafa, is Chinese version of Qigong from Tao and Buddhism, and by my information, the highest version of cultivation of energy through the normal, and you are protected through a day from illness, negative energies. You have gong inside that protects you from different things. And so why is so important that people awake? Because, okay, we have a deep state. I don't think you and we have enough time to go through all of that. We can have this conversation for 10 hours, but we have a deep state that is controlling us through media, every aspect of our lives, through wars, through banking, through music, through all of that, right? So let's just assume the people that are watching this understand what we are talking about, right?
Sure.
And they put in food in our poison in our foods and water, and pretty much just to lower our vibration. Entertainment is there to distract us from the real things that are important. And the important thing is that we find out who we are and where we come from. And, and I believe that what you're doing with your exercises is like to help us remember who we are and to raise our vibrations so we can go where we're supposed to go.
Absolutely, Matish. Look, I totally understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Just before I go to the present time and why we need to do this internal work, if you will, I just wanna finish with 2-3 sentences.
Please.
So after that ice age, the life continued to about 7,000 years of age, 7,000 years more. That's where we are seeing the ancient Egyptian culture, the ancient summer, the pre-Columbian culture, and the so-called pre-Buddhistic culture, or the ancient Rama Empire. But unfortunately, around 4,000 years ago, there was another conflict, which is described in Mahabharata, Ramayana, and so on and so forth, which actually induced a genetic downgrade, which means beings that were able to do telekinetic activity, they were able to communicate telepathically, doing astral traveling, and so on and so forth. They were not able to do that because certain forces applied a genetic mutation weapon, radiation, that literally downgraded the genetic functionality of the entire biological existence on this planet, or on the surface of the planet, more accurately. Which means before we had the presence of the gigantism, so we can see that there is evidence of a huge, what we call dinosaurs, animals, huge, sea world creatures. We even see a couple of body sizes of humans. We can't call them humans. That's the thing that we need to differentiate, because those were not humans. They were humanoids, which means some had elongated skulls, some had different body, heights and sizes, and so on and so forth. Some had elongated spikes, growing from the top of their head, long ears, and so on and so forth. Different colors of the skin, of course, and different performance and genetic makeup. In other words, before the fall, the biological existence on this planet had something which is called the optimal genetic expression, which means the best what the DNA and RNA can provide to a living organism. So when this mutation weapon was applied, the radiation caused that all these possibilities of the living force are shrink to just basic existence, which means the so-called modern humans that we are nowadays, with only 5 senses input and the entire memory of the previous incarnation or any kind of previous existence, it's lost, it's cut. You can't access it, at least not most people. So after those 4,000 years, that conflict that occurred, we were literally observing lights in the sky, from time to time, and eventually we become more aware of the so-called extraterrestrial presence during the World War I and World War II. So in parallel with our airplanes and whatever, we were seeing lights, cigar-shaped UFOs and all kind of different shapes flying in parallel that were doing maneuvers, you name it. So as soon as that was discovered, there was a deep state, as you mentioned, that was created in order to research who are those, creatures, or how should I put it, civilizations that are out there. And it quickly turned out that we are not just not in control. We are not controlling the oceans or the ground or whatever, or the sky, but we are not controlling the solar system at all. And it turned out that these vehicles are entering into the volcanic openings and into the hydrothermal vents in deep ocean, and entering the so-called whole Earth, if you will, having bases there, and that we are actually under monitoring 24/7, and there is a lot of things which are going on, like crossbreeding and extracting of genetics and so on and so forth, which are actually done without our consent, which means we've been led to believe that we are living in reality, which is all normal, but in reality we are kind of like a hologram where we are watched and abused in a certain way by certain negative species that stayed in the solar system more than 12,000 years ago. So Nowadays, we are having, unfortunately, something which they're pushing as a fourth industrial revolution, which actually, in translation, means that the entire humankind needs to be augmented, changed in something which they refer to as transhumanism, which means there will be nanotechnology that will be injected into the human bodies or eventually as synthetic organisms on a nanoscale that will be literally connected to the cloud. So this cloud, through the 5G network tomorrow, 6G, 7G, whatever is going to occur, literally is going to send information to the cloud, which the artificial intelligence will create algorithms that will read the data, the heartbeat, the blood pressure, and you name it, and it doesn't stop just there. It literally can read your consciousness, your dreams, if you will, and it can implement thoughts, delete memories, implement new memories, change of your behavior, and even terminate the human subject if they feel need to do so. So the question is why it's all this happening? The first thing that we need to understand is that anything that we are getting as an input from the mainstream media, it's not true. The mainstream media, as long as the major political parties everywhere around the world are just there to serve as puppets for a force which actually drives the reality behind the scenes. So in the world, there are 13 families which is highly occultistic in a dark way, if you will. So we're talking about Rothschilds, Rockefellers, and 11 more families, which are literally in charge of the 4 largest companies around the world, out of which BlackRock and Vanguard are the top ones. Yeah. So the stakeholders in those companies are controlling the entire institutions around the world, and through the World Economic Forum, they are fusing the money into the Grand Masonic lodges, which every country has, which is the mother, Masonic lodge of the entire country, and from there the money are fused into the local Masonic centers, and from there into the politics, into the media, into the intelligence, into the police, the health system, industry, telecommunications, and so on and so forth, academia, education system, and so on and so forth, which means they control the human society and the human thought through the institutions. So that's the reality that we are talking. So just to make a short parallel is that during the 50s, 60s, when they were testing certain type of radars and certain Tesla type of like a death ray beam, if you will, they noticed that some of the UFOs were vulnerable and they were falling down. So usually people will ask, how come a civilization that is so advanced that can reach space, travel between space, can be vulnerable to a simple radar? It is very simple, because most of the technology they're using for a guiding system, it operates on the fiber optic systems, which means they don't use the wires and the Internet of Things as we do. They use fiber optics, or the information travels through light. Every time when a specific type of radar produces particles which are going, it's disrupting these guiding systems, and some of those vehicles become vulnerable and they fell down. But the problem is that when they literally went to the crash sites, the ones that they were able to access from 50, 60, so to speak, they didn't just found the alien bodies, but they found a part of the human beings and part of the kettles. So what in further stages become known as a kettle mutilation, so which means some parts of the kettle were literally cut off with a surgical laser precision, which means when you cut a tissue with knife, it leaves a scar, but it was cut on a cellular level where the cell was ending. So when the doctors and the scientists examined, the tissue that was taken, they knew that this was done by very high sophisticated technology. And as the research further developed, they noticed that the kettle that were supposed to be taken, it was marked with certain light that was visible on ultraviolet, which means they were marking whatever kettle they wanna abduct. Long story short, as all this research progressed, the so-called Majestic 12 and the Deep State formed at the time. And at the beginning, it was like a war between the CIA, if you will, and the ex-KGB in order who will acquire more alien technology and will weaponize it. But as the time progressed and the Freemasonry expanded everywhere around the planet, they literally connected into one deep state shadow government, which means the US, the Russia, and the China are the three most dominant countries nowadays. So, long story short, they found objects in the human bodies of the real abductees that were able to send signals to someone and receive signals. In other words, alien implants. They found that it's either single wall or double wall or triple wall carbon nanotube, which is actually encompassed by the gray shell, which produced the interface between the human body and the object itself. In other words, the brain didn't recognize the foraging object as a foraging, and it didn't cause an infection. It was just fusing into the system. And the deep state was struggling to find out how exactly it works. For the scientists in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and to mid-90s to some point, the technology was too advanced. But as far as I know, around mid-90s, they made a breakthrough and they realized how this nanotechnology actually works once when it's exposed to electromagnetic radiation. And that's where the elite, if you will, found an opportunity. They said, if we can, let's say, track the whales in the ocean, track the birds, and track their migrational paths and routes and so on and so forth. If someone else out there is tagging us and observing us, why we shouldn't use the same technology to tag 7-8 billion people and do with them whatever we want to do. They will be in full control and mercy of those who control this technology. The problem is, as all this so-called pandemic occurred from 2020, 2021, 22, there were billions of people that were literally injected with this technology. So these people, despite the fact that they don't wear mobile phones with them, if you install, let's say, detect a Bluetooth device on your mobile phone, the app will detect additional IP address. As the physical body of the person moves around, the source will move around too. So in other words, as soon as it becomes exposed to a telephone tower or whatever, 5G. It assembles 5G especially, it will assemble a very precise nano electronical circuit inside, which actually produces, how should I put it, receive signals and emit signals to someone. So it emits the signals to the cloud, where the cloud is literally, as mentioned, using the artificial intelligence to create algorithms and valuable, usable data about that particular subject. There was some other form which is also known, is that the PCR test and the DNA samples literally created a huge database that were soon going to be actually used for the so-called digital identity, because every DNA, it's a special antenna which produces, it has a special signature, if you will, and when a certain frequency with a specific, microwave radiation is applied, it can target that specific individual. Sure. So now we come to the point that I can answer your question clearly. There is a technology, let's start with that can literally detect these anomalies in the bloodstream and whatever, because as mentioned, there is a knowledge of the graphene oxide and even graphene hydroxide, which is more deadly, if you will. But the graphene oxide can be very magnetic. Whenever it's injected in the body, it can literally stick, spoons, forks and whatever metal objects on the body. And the problem is that this magnetism doesn't stay on the region where the injection went, but it just circulates around the body. And if it becomes too strong by the electromagnetic radiation, it can produce blood coagulation. And if it's done around the heart area, it can actually produce heart attack. If it's done around the brain area, it can create stroke. And in order to change this, one way is to use technology which is very similar to RIFE, which means a frequency generator which can create a certain patterns, certain frequency that can, to some degree, neutralize these electronic circuits, if you will, you know. And especially here we are dealing with the so-called square waves. Those square waves are not the same as the sinus, you know, waves in a alternated current, but it's literally a sum of the harmonics, which are actually creating the frequencies. And it is clear as a day that the cancer cells, at least most of them, are vulnerable between 100,000 hertz and 300,000 hertz, which are actually creating a cleaning or polishing of the old synthetic organisms, especially the ones that are damaging the cells. So, as you mentioned, unfortunately, the deep state has a distorted vision of the future where we are overpopulated, and they want to literally cut off the population from 8 billion to just 500 million in perpetual nature, so to speak, you know, balance with the nature, you know. So that's the famous Georgia stone, if you remember, that it was demolished not long ago. By the people who are also in the secret societies and who doesn't agree or see the future as they do. Because in reality, the elite is using the Freemasonry, but they will be using the Freemasonry only as long as they need them, because they don't need middle players. As soon as they are finished with the general population, they will be taken out of the picture just as well. Until only the elite stays, which is in the full control, again question mark full control, and all the rest will be puppets. And the other way, as we discussed, is through evolution of consciousness, through awakening of the internal potentials, so the energy which can be awakened and can deal with all this radiation and synthetic organisms or whatever tech is placed inside. Because the problem is that people think that it's only the injections which are problem, but now they're spraying the skies.
Yeah.
The chemtrails are everywhere. They used to hide, let's say, in certain parts of the day, you know, not so visibly, but now they are spraying 24/7. And
they just don't care anymore. They don't care anymore. They just
exactly.
It's visible every day. Yeah, it's obvious.
Yeah. So they contain smart nanoplastics. Some of them contain graphene, aluminum, barium, you name it. And this is something that we breathe every day. It falls down into the food supply. It falls down into the water that we drink, and so on and so forth. So that is why it is very important to understand that we have a natural mechanism that if we develop them, we can protect ourselves and protect others. So the first thing that we need to understand is that we are not just physical bodies. So we are immaterial, intelligent life forms which exist in this 7-dimensional universe, as I was explaining before. And we have a vehicle for each of those dimensions. So for this physical vehicle, for this physical plane of existence, we use these physical vehicles, which is just like driving a car, right? So if we hooked our brains to the EEG device, the EEG device will show the brain frequency, which actually it's called beta brain frequency, or beta, you know, brain activity or range. But if we change this beta range, you know, into alpha and then into theta, if you will, our brain literally starts producing dimethyltryptamine in a natural way. And as soon as the dimethyltryptamine appears inside the thalamus and the pineal gland, it activates a shift in the perception. It literally from normal perception of the five senses, it shifts to the so-called extrasensory perception, where it perceives things beyond the five senses. And once when this is applied, there is a huge science that we need to deal with the astral membrane or the mental screen. And if we shift the frequency even more, we can achieve the vibrational state and eventually depart the physical body and the etheric body and so on and so forth. So the more we realize that we are consciousness, the more all this reality that we are part of seems, like a part of the catalyst process, which we are here to assist ourselves and others to literally separate, from the ones that they don't want to be separated. Because obviously, whatever we're going to talk about, there is a percentage of the human beings, they don't want to hear it because they're not there yet. Their frequency is at the level where they still need more experience, whatever that experience is going to be, until they evolve to the point that they can pass further. So in the same time, we will try our best to help them also as much as the circumstances allow. But as you can clearly see, Matthias, there are forces that are shaping this reality on this planet in one direction, and that one direction is not going to be well for the humankind. So that's why we all need to unite, share our knowledge, our understanding of the situation, and do our best in any way we can to literally either slow down or stop these forces that are actually changing the human society and the human civilization under the quote unquote fourth industrial revolution. So in the seminars, I will fully elaborate about the protocols and the methods that one, if uses them right, can develop those effects of the force, if you will, that can change the existence and also can expand the frontiers of the perception and understanding. Because as long as we are only with five senses, we are only getting the information from the internet and from what eyes can tell us. But that's like walking half blind, because what we can see in the visible spectrum is just a tiny part of the visible spectrum of the electromagnetic spectrum. But if we can't see practically anything on the infrared or ultraviolet spectrum at all. But with these other senses, if you will, that are beyond the five senses, we can spot exactly what the infrared camera or night vision camera, ultraviolet camera can detect. So when we are at the stage of understanding why this is happening, maybe I will just give a quick elaboration, because in 2002 in Chibolton, there was a crop circle that appeared, which was massive. It was showing an alien being with a huge circle around it. And when the scientists actually looked into it, it turned out that it's a ASCII computer code. And they were clearly saying that the content is beware of the barriers of the false gifts and broken promises. Much pain, but still time. In other words, between the lines, the deep state established the contact with the so-called grays, or the beings which unfortunately can't think for themselves. They are in the hive mind, and what transhumanism actually means is that more and more you will lose your individual power of making decisions, and more you will become fully dependent and obedient to whatever driving force is driving you or directing you to do, think, or whatever. It started with China. For example, the living in China nowadays, it's very hard because the surveillance cameras are everywhere, the facial recognition, and automatically, even if you want to buy a piece of bread, just a single meal, you have to open your mouth just for the camera to recognize your, face. And as soon as the face recognition is activated and confirmed, you can purchase, the product, whatever that is.
Yeah, but you have to be careful what you say, because if you say against the system, then they just turn off your option of buying food or anything else, right?
That's a social credit score system,
Yes,
because
yes.
it goes with parallel. So if you don't agree with the narrative, your social credit score system will get lower, and that means that you cannot use the public transport, you cannot use a loan, you wanna, let's say, how should I put it, take a taxi, the taxi will say, sorry, your credit score is too low, I can't do my service. In other words, it's a total slavery towards something that we don't wanna go in that direction. So that's why it is extremely important that we all wake up and we all put our how should I put it, resistance out of there, because if we wait for someone else to do the job for us, it's not gonna happen. Many people also in the spiritual communities, they think that Pleiadians will land and it will save us, they will save us all, and we will all transcend to the fifth dimension. But let me mention this. During the World War I, about 40 million people died, men, women, children. World War II, over 80 million people passed and died, were brutally killed and massacred, women, children, men. Not to mention Vietnam, not to mention Gaza, Iraq, and Sarajevo, and so on and so forth. The real question is, where are those Pleiadians when the humankind was literally slaughtered to a high degree? Did someone help? Did someone lend it? Did someone interfere to stop the violence? There were lights everywhere where those things were happening, but no force interfered, which unfortunately we have to be logically equipped and intellectually strong enough to ask the right questions. What's going on? If this is the case, something is not right. So there are some views where they say they don't want to interfere because they don't want to mess up with our evolution, with our progress. But is this really the case? Because if we look back at the ancient pyramids in Giza, how sophisticated they were, and then all of a sudden nothing is left out of it, and we are kept in the dark of our ancient past. Vatican is keeping thousands and thousands of records, and the technology. So Tataria was the last form of some kind of like a social setup that was keeping all those advancements, and they were taken by the shadow government or the deep state. And nowadays, if someone actually came up with a brilliant idea of, let's say, wireless power supply, that don't need to use the electricity, for powering your house, you have immediately people from the government coming, buying your patent or eventually confiscating and charging you with the offense. The question is, where is this technology going to? And why we are kept in such a low range of existence, where we going out and we're seeing all these chemtrails around us in the sky. The only thing that we do is just scrolling our mobile phones. So once again, just to make a very good, precise wake-up call, I've been there flying around, communicating with more local beings. There will be no force that will be coming to save us. We have to work out our own salvation. We have to save ourselves. Exactly. And the only way to do that is first to understand what's happening, who we are, what happened on this planet thousands of years ago. Once we understand what truly happened and what is hidden from us, we will understand the problem. And there is a saying, once when you really see and understand the problem, from the problem, the answer will arise, which means collectively, there are very smart people in the world that will work together to find the right solution for the humankind. And one of the steps to do that is through awakening our potentials, because once when we realize what we are, once when we open and develop our potentials, the deep state can't control these kind of beings. They're independent, they're sovereign, and they will just simply know, I would rather choose to pass into other dimension than stay this and be your slave.
Amazing. Yeah, I agree. I agree 100%. What you said now. So maybe because we have a limited time, I have one question that is for me personally. I heard it somewhere else on another podcast, but I would really like you if you can explain to me because and for all the people that had epileptic seizure.
Mm-hmm.
I had, when I was 12, 13 years old, I had, based on the knowledge of the biggest one called Grand Mal, and luckily I had only one. Okay, never happened again. They still, doctors still to this day, they don't believe me, but and if you could explain from your knowledge and perspective what that is, because even the doctors, they still, by this today, they don't know why it's happening. Literally, they don't know yet. So
Look, the way I understand it,
please.
it can be induced artificially. So once again, it can be done by technology, it can be done by certain beings, or eventually it can be done by certain immaterial living forms which occur in the astral dimension, which are nearby.
Okay.
Sometimes when that's the case, usually the temperature drops a few degrees, and there is something even known as poltergeist, where out of the blue the object starts falling in air, if you will, you start to hear noises, but also it affects your body. It can levitate your body or whatever. That's one option to consider. However, the most probable option is that as mentioned, our consciousness is hooked to 7 vehicles or 7 hosts, if you will, out of which the etherical host is the middle host between the astral vehicle and the physical vehicle. So that's where all the chakras and all the meridians are literally interconnected. At the beginning, we are pretty much born with no dantians whatsoever, just membranes, if you will, which if you don't cultivate the power in some way or form, they will eventually stay inactive during the entire time. But if we cultivate the energy, we feel the dantians, which I will explain all the ways on which are known to me on the seminars. Literally, this energy can then pass into the electrical circuitry, if you will, of the etheric body, which means it can pass through the meridians. Some of the meridians are leading towards the earth, towards the grounding. And in case, for some reason, whatever the balance between yang and yin energy is in the etheric body gets disrupted, or eventually, for whatever reasons, medications or stress or whatever, a certain meridian becomes active, it can literally stream energy directly into the earth. And as soon as the energy streams directly into the earth, sometimes it can stream, let's say, one energy polarity from one leg and then bring up, a different polarity, and then it creates a short circuit. And as soon as the short circuit is created, you have a seizure, or eventually the nervous system gets electrical impulses to literally start moving without control. In other words, the human brain is no longer capable of sustaining the balance, and there is a huge effect of shaking without any visible reason, so to speak. So that's a more approachable solution. I'm not saying that that was the case in your case, but nevertheless, the way I see it, it's probable.
Thank you. Mr. Pane, thank you very much for your time today and your explanation. All your dates and cities will be also in the YouTube channel with your links where they can apply. And I'll see you in Ljubljana then and looking forward to to hearing your knowledge and actual practical exercises.
Thank you so much, Mr. Matthews. It was a real pleasure, and see you in Ljubljana shortly.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.